Would you mind doing just the the little basic about yourself thing first?
Sure.
What got you started?
I'm an immigration lawyer based in Portland, Oregon. I own a law firm called Tailwind Immigration Law. And what we focus on is immigration for people of so-called exceptional ability, which tends to be artists, athletes, and researchers. I also do a fair amount of pro bono or volunteer work for people seeking asylum. That takes a few different forms. That can be either work within detention centers, which are essentially big federal prisons that are generally in South Texas and the southeastern United States. And I also do work on appeal for people who are appealing rulings where the immigration judges said they don't merit asylum. I work on those appeals for them. I got into immigration law after living in Australia for a year after college, working with refugees down there, and I've had a passion for refugees and asylum seekers ever since.
And I remember you. I'm sorry. I'll probably have to edit the video because I'm going to ask questions that aren't on the list. That's just the way I am. I remember you saying in Australia you were there because your wife was doing a residency or a grant to do some research.
Right. So she got a Fulbright grant, which is a federal government grant on research in cancer.
And when you were there, you were not a lawyer yet at the time. You were just volunteering and helping.
Yeah,
is that right? That's right.
That's immigration law. I didn't have a work authorized visa in Australia, so I had to volunteer. So I was fresh out of college, and I was able to volunteer for the refugee and immigration law firm down there. And I saw that there were a bunch of volunteers who could do like this much good, which was great. And then there were all these lawyers who could do like this much good. And I thought, wow, I really want to be one of them. Those lawyers, they're able to move the ball a lot further than I am as a volunteer. So I studied for the LSAT. I took it in a tiny classroom with no air conditioning in Brisbane, Australia. And the rest is history. Got into law school and ended up doing immigration law straight out of law school.
Thank you. I knew that was interesting. I didn't want to miss that. All right. Some of the questions that the kids had asked when we were discussing different things, these are not in necessarily any order. We were just brainstorming questions. How many people face deportation from the United States each year? And it's okay if you don't know the answer. We could probably Google that.
I don't know a specific number. I can tell you it's in the hundreds of thousands.
Okay. How many people are actually deported out of those that are supposed to be? You touched on this last time.
You mean those who go to immigration court hearings? For asylum, for example, it's about 50-50.
Okay.
So nationally, you have about a 50% chance, a little bit less, of being granted asylum if you go to an immigration court hearing. Now, that varies a ton based on where you are. I lived in Atlanta before this, and the Atlanta Immigration Court approves 2% of asylum claims.
Oh, my gosh.
New York City approves about 84% of asylum claims.
Wow, what a difference.
Yeah, and there's some differences in the population that they're seeing, but they don't account for that much of a difference.
Yeah, is that just because of the
judges?
I was going to say, that's just the judges there that are putting their personal spin on that. And that would be hard, though, as a judge, to not put your own personal opinion on there. But on the other hand, that's a big difference.
It's a big difference, right? So that's why there's a lot of work in trying to get people represented in places like Atlanta, try to get good attorneys into those courtrooms to make the argument that a lot of these people do deserve asylum and make sure that everyone who has a valid case is able to win. That's the goal.
And why would people be in immigration court in Atlanta? What am I trying to say? Why do you go? How do they get assigned to which court they get assigned to?
The way it typically works is when somebody comes in and seeks asylum, they're either detained in a detention center, which is a big jail, or they present at the border and they're paroled in the United States. Either way, they're going to be asked, who are you going to live with? People will say, well, I have a brother in Atlanta, or I have a cousin in New York City, or I have a friend in Miami, whatever it may be. And wherever they go live, they're within the jurisdiction of the immigration court, covers that area. Now, I think some of these people end up in Atlanta, and they're blindsided by the fact that they've wound up in the toughest jurisdiction in the U.S.
No.
They probably didn't realize it before going to live with their cousin in Atlanta. that's going to be a tough road for them.
Yeah. I'm really surprised by the difference with that. Okay. Getting back to our questions, a lot of these are about deportation, which is not really, the thing that we're talking about as much. You talked about this last time too, where you said there's a certain number of immigrants, a certain number of people that are allowed to immigrate to the United States ends up sort of seeming like a quota because there are so many more people immigrating from different countries. But where do the majority of legal versus not legal, I shouldn't say that, people that know ahead of time, I'm sorry?
You mean undocumented versus documented people?
Yeah, or even like people seeking asylum versus people just coming in for other reasons. Where do those people come from? And I'm sure it's different for each of those.
It is different, yeah. So we'll start with asylum. At least in the last 5 or 6 years, people seeking asylum have overwhelmingly been from a few countries in Central America. Those are Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And the reason they come from those countries is because those are largely failed states. The government is not as strong as the gangs in those countries, which has a lot of cascading effects, but basically means that there are entire neighborhoods and cities that are gang controlled, where the police or other government entities don't have any power to go help people. So we see lots of really bad situations down there, lots of people seeking asylum. There are certainly people who seek asylum from other parts of the world. I don't mean to say it's only Central America, but I would say probably 80% right now are coming from Central America. In terms of employment-based immigration, you again see people from all over the world who want to come to the U.S. for various reasons. But just because they're the biggest countries in the world, China and India tend to be the countries with the largest number of employment-based immigrants. And then the other big driver is family-based immigration. And that's driven by the desire to have families reunified in the United States. So if you have a husband or a wife here, or a daughter or a son, you want them to be able to reunify with their spouse or their parent or children. And that comes from all over. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty evenly distributed.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Can you briefly talk about, or I don't know how briefly you could possibly summarize this, but how has the process of immigration changed over the years? How has the process of getting into the United States changed over the years?
A lot. Yeah, so we can go all the way back to the start, which is the first immigration law passed in the United States, which was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and it's as xenophobic and racist as it sounds. It was a law passed entirely to exclude anyone from East Asia from living in the United States. This was caused by this xenophobic hysteria that was prevalent during that part of the century. That basically said that people who are from East Asia are dangerous. We need to get them out of our country. That was the first immigration law. And when we think about immigration, we often think about the inscription on the base of the Statue of Liberty that says, "Give us your huddled masses." That poem was written the next year, right? That was written in 1883. And so we've always had this tension between we're afraid of these different people that don't look like, Americans, right? That exists to this day. And also this thought that we should welcome everyone. This undergirds everything. The push and pull has been constant since 1882. So we've had an act after that to specifically exclude Japanese people. We've had acts to exclude members of the LGBT community. That was passed in 1965, right? Until 1980, anyone who was gay wasn't allowed in the United States. So we have this really fraught history. And there have been racial and ethnic quotas as part of that as well. And some of those legacies continue in our law to this day. Now, we're in a much better place now than we were before, but there's always the risk of slipping back in that direction. That's what gives us law was written. So the Statue of Liberty wasn't put in place until the early 1900s, but the poem was written to fund the statue. And it was hugely popular. This poem circulated in all major newspapers all over the U.S. And it helped raise money for this massive undertaking to build the Statue of Liberty to show how welcoming we were. At the same time that we were actively excluding people.
That's crazy.
that could be a whole class in and of itself.
Yeah, seriously.
Talk about how that dichotomy could exist at the same time. But there you go.
And still does.
Yeah.
Still has that. Okay, and you talked about this before also, about how long does the process take to get immigration status, get legal immigration status in the United States?
Yeah, that depends largely on what you're trying to do. So if you want to just get a visitor visa to the U.S., that's something you could take care of in a month or two, applying through a U.S. consulate or embassy outside the U.S. If you want to get a green card, depending on your category and which country you're from, you could be looking at a wait from anywhere from about a year to upwards of 20 years. If you're national of the Philippines, Mexico, China, or India, you're likely going to have a backlog on your green card category. And for most people in that situation, that backlog is going to be between 5 and 20 years. They wait that long before they can even apply.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Just to think of that much time. Would you mind, since I'm still recording you, I hope, would you mind telling your stories that you told of your, the happy stories and your sad stories? Would
Sure,
you mind telling us again?
Stories. Yeah, so obviously part of being an immigration attorney is dealing with people in the most vulnerable times, and that can sometimes be really gratifying when you win, and it can be kind of crushing when you don't. So part of doing this profession is learning to cope with the highs and the lows and sort of stay in the middle when these things happen, while still being really empathetic for the people you're dealing with. One of my best experiences was when I was a brand new lawyer. It was within my first year of practicing. I'd been a runner in college and continued to be a long distance runner at this time. And one of my heroes was the runner from United Kingdom, from Ireland, who just had this persona about him. They had the hair and the tattoos, and he's just really cool, Olympic athlete. So I got called into my managing partner's office, and she slaps this case down on the desk and says, I've got this case for so-and-so, and I really want you to handle it. Have you heard of him? I looked at the name, and I said, yeah, so that's my hero. Is this for real? I can't believe it. And it was. And so I got to know him. I got to work on his case. It took about a year and a half, and we finally got him approved for a green card. And he's still here, living in the U.S., doing just great. So it's just really gratifying, really a happy moment. You've asked for a sad case as well. So one that comes to mind is when I was working at the detention center in Dilley, Texas, in South Texas a few years ago. I had a woman come in who's from El Salvador, and she'd been a hairdresser. She had a really successful business there until the gang caught wind of the fact that she was doing quite well, and they started extorting her. So each Friday they would come by and they'd ask for $50. She was able to pay that, so she would pay them off. And then they started asking for $100. And she was able to pay that, so she would pay them off. And then they started asking for $200. She wasn't able to pay it. And so they started threatening her. And eventually it came to a head where she came home and someone knocked on the door. She opened the door and they had a grenade. And they said, if you don't get out of here or pay us our $200, we're coming back tonight. She knew exactly what that meant. So she got out of there. She came to the U.S. She was detained with her 2 kids. And that's when I met them. I walked into the room and she instantly just started crying. So I got her some tissues and was able to help her calm down a little bit. And asked her to tell her story, and she told me all about what had happened. I thought she had a really good case for asylum, but she was ultimately denied and sent back to El Salvador. I have no idea what's happened to her or her children, but they think about them a lot. I'm really worried about what's happened to them.
It would be a hard one, not knowing. The not knowing, I think, is...
The not knowing is tough.
Yeah, it's rough. Thank you for telling those again. I'm looking through these questions, too. We read a book called The Sun is Also a Star, which was really a romance book, I think, but it was really neat for giving you an idea of somebody who was going through a deportation process. and in the book, the girl's family is being deported to Jamaica after having the girl herself was like 2, I think, when the family moved to the United States, right? Very young. Do you remember? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you read the book with us too. Apparently, I'm the only one that has, and I have a terrible memory. The girl was very young, so her family was being deported, and all of a sudden, here she is in high school, and she's only ever known the United States. So she is, this is her home, and now she's having to move out. One question the kids had is, do the courts just consider that fact? Do judges look at that and think about that, or whoever's looking at it, when they decide to deport a family? Like, do they consider the fact that, hey, these kids have been here since they were little, or is that not really any part of the consideration?
Yeah, good question. Historically, that hasn't been considered as a factor. Under the Obama administration, there came out a policy called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, which was in the news and continues to be in the news. DACA is still an active program, although it's under a lot of scrutiny. It might not be around for much longer. But at this point, someone in that situation could probably take advantage of DACA and remain in the United States, although their parents would be removed from the U.S. So lots of children do choose to be deported because they want to be with their parents rather than be alone in the U.S. But in terms of the parents' cases, they wouldn't likely receive a more favorable decision because they had a child brought here at a young age.
Okay. One other question specific to the book is, in the book, the high school girl, asks a lawyer to help her and says, can you talk to the immigration judge? And the lawyer was able to talk to the immigration judge and delay the deportation. Is that something that really can happen?
Not as such. The judges aren't really accessible. They have a huge caseload, and so they certainly wouldn't be open to you coming into their chambers and just talking to them at any time. So I couldn't see that happening in real life. No.
We were questioning that. It didn't seem like that would be possible, so we wanted to get that.
But if you were there in a hearing, you could ask for a delay, and depending on the judge, that might or might not be granted.
Okay. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions that aren't just things we can Google search. You know what I mean? Like, I hate to ask you for Google search questions.
Whatever, it's fine.
Oh yeah, good. Tina, you asked your question.
You say you did come into the country illegally. What would be a good case as to why you should be allowed to stay in the country?
Can you say again, what would be a good case why you'd be allowed to stay in the U.S.?
Yeah, say if you did come in illegally, why should the judge allow you to stay?
If you committed a crime, is that what you said?
No, if you came in illegally to the country.
What would be a good thing for you to tell the judge? Hey, you should keep me, not deport me because I'm great. What would be some of those?
What would be a reason that they would allow you to?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? So there are only a few ways to stay here if you came to the United States without documentation. One is asylum, and that's why you see asylum so much in the news right now, because lots of people come to the U.S. and they say, hey, like, my life's threatened in my home country. Now, the Trump administration is skeptical, by and large, of that claim. They say these people are just saying that, right? The immigration lawyers, me, are just telling them the magic words to say so they get asylum. But for a lot of people, their lives really are threatened. And so they really do merit asylum, and that's the way that they can come in with no documentation. And there are a few other ways to get legal status. One is called the Violence Against Women Act. So this actually doesn't apply to just women, but if you've been a victim of a crime, which tends to be domestic violence, and you're helpful to police in investigating the crime and bringing the perpetrator to justice, you can then receive a temporary visa, which leads to a green card through that, even if you don't have legal status. There's also something called a T visa, which is for people who've been victims of torture in the U.S. who are helpful to police and help find the torturer. So there are a few ways, but really not a whole
lot. If one last question about families: if a child is born in the USA to illegal immigrants, they are a citizen, but what happens to their parents? Is there any good that comes to their parents?
No,
I'm not saying that right.
not in the short term. So if their parents are able to stay here until the child turns 21, then the child could turn around and sponsor their parents for legal status, but not until that point.
Okay.
So it's really a remote benefit to the parents, and often they don't make it that far, right? They're deported before the kid turns 21.
Now, if they are deported and they take their child who was born in the United States with them, is the child eligible to come back? I mean, they're a citizen, correct? And they're eligible to come back at any point normally?
Yeah, as a citizen, they're just like
normal
you and me.
citizens,
they can come back whenever they want. Now, the Trump administration has been making noises about getting rid of birthright citizenship, so changing that rule. We'll see if that actually happens. It's in the Constitution, so it's going to be very difficult to change.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't that would be something that would really have to be a big deal change, right? Like that's
the big deal change.
Well, you know what I mean. Not
just
goes all the way back. Yeah. So that's scary to think about. That's
it's on the table.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't. Well, that's my personal opinion. All right. I'm sure I'm missing some other questions. I asked you about the how long it takes. I think I've asked all the questions I was supposed to. Tina, do you have any more questions? Or
yeah. So if you currently have a green card right now, what would be the process to gaining full citizenship in the U.S.?
Gaining citizenship once you have a green card is that the question? Yeah. So once you have a green card, it depends on how you got the green card as to how long you have to wait before you can apply to be a citizen. So if you got it through marriage to a U.S. citizen, you wait 3 years, and then you can apply for citizenship through naturalization. If you got it by any other means, then you have to wait 5 years, and then you can apply for naturalization, which is the process of getting citizenship. Now, to become a citizen, you have to pass an English language test, and you actually have to pass a civics test, which includes questions like who was the first president of the United States, what do the 13 stripes on the flag stand for, those sorts of things that we learned in middle and high school government classes.
Is there an age limit as to how old you have to be to apply?
Yeah, you have to be 18 to apply for citizenship. Before you're 18, if one of your parents becomes a citizen, then you automatically become a citizen.
Oh.
But once you, and then you apply separately. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Okay. And also, it's like a personal question, but if you have a green card right now and you go into another, like you're going to Europe or something, how would you apply for a visa? Like, would that work differently than if you were a citizen in the United States?
How would you apply for a visa to Europe?
Would it be a different process than if you were a citizen?
It's going to depend on the EU rules on that. I'm not really sure what the rule is, but for most countries, it's going to be the same process for a permanent resident or a citizen to get a temporary visa.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe you answered this before. How long is green card status? I know you have to renew it at some point, but I don't know how I missed that. How long is green card status?
So yeah, it's a little bit complicated. There are two different cards that we refer to as green cards. There's conditional permanent residence, which is something you get if you've married a U.S. citizen, but you've only been married for less than 2 years. And so that's good for 2 years. And you have to apply to renew that before it expires. And once that's renewed, then it's actually permanent residence. Everyone else gets the full permanent version.
Okay.
And when you get that, you're a permanent resident forever.
Okay.
Right? The card itself, the green card, is good for 10 years, and you should renew it every 10 years. But even if you were to let it expire, you would still be a permanent resident.
So if you were to travel outside the country for more than a certain amount of time, would it still be valid? Like if
that's a really good question. You know your stuff. Yeah, that's the question about abandoning a green card. So yeah, you can abandon a green card by ceasing to be a permanent resident of the United States. So we hold that if you leave the U.S. for more than a year, you've essentially said, I don't want to reside there anymore, I want to reside somewhere else. And often they will cancel the green card. I never advise my clients to go outside the U.S. for more than 180 days during a year, just to make sure that they're nowhere close to being called out on the carpet for abandoning the green card. That's an excellent question. Really good.
So when you have the green card status, it's I guess I should ask this: how many people then, not how many people, but how often do people who are have green card status apply for permanent citizenship, and it's not called that
Yeah,
naturalization?
it really depends because there are tax consequences here too. So I know people who keep their foreign citizenship and don't apply for U.S. citizenship ever. I've got a friend in Florida who is a friend of my parents. He's 65 years old. He got his green card when he was 30. He still got a green card.
Okay.
You know, he never applied for citizenship because he would be subject to 2 sets of taxes, and he doesn't want to deal with it.
Okay.
I see other people who apply the first day they possibly can for citizenship because they're really proud and they want to be able to vote and they want to be able to participate and they want to be safe. You know, with a green card, you're still kind of, you know, a political football, right? When you're a citizen, you're just like anybody else, and you can't be deported. There's no way that they can revoke your citizenship unless you lie to them. So you're basically here for good, you know. So I see both sides, and I don't know what the stats are, but my gut is that most people apply pretty soon after they're able to.
Yeah, that's what I would think too, but I have nothing to base that on.
Yeah,
I'm just sort of guessing there.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think I've covered all the questions that I always have more questions, but I've covered enough. Tina, do you have anything else you want to ask? All right. I really appreciate you doing this. And I appreciate you letting me record you too, so the students that couldn't be here will at least get a chance to hear what your answers are.
Awesome. I'd love to talk to a future class if you want to do this again next year.
I would love to.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much. And
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.